Welcome to the Lost Archives. Quiet stories from forgotten history. Each night, we open a single file from the past. A vanished city, a misplaced discovery, a life almost erased from record. There is no spectacle here, no urgency, only the patient unfolding of what once was. And together, we'll turn the page. The Byzantine sailors called it hygron pyr, liquid fire. It left the bronze nozzle as a roaring stream, spread across the water's surface and burned. Greek fire, as foreign chroniclers named it, could not be extinguished with water. Water made it burn faster, spreading the flame across the surface of the sea itself. For nearly 5 centuries, Greek fire was the most feared weapon in the known world, and its formula was never written down. It died with the empire that invented it, and no one since has confirmed what it was made of. A Greek-speaking Jewish architect named Callinicus had fled the Arab conquest of Syria, arriving in Constantinople sometime around 668 CE. He carried with him knowledge of incendiary materials gathered from the Eastern Mediterranean, and a process for combining them that the Byzantines had never seen. Callinicus worked under the patronage of Emperor Constantine IV, refining a mixture of naphtha, resins and other agents, possibly quicklime, into a liquid that could be pressurized through a bronze tube and ignited at the nozzle. The exact mechanism of delivery was, if anything, more critical than the formula itself. Arab fleets had been attacking Constantinople for 5 consecutive years, using the nearby peninsula of Cyzicus as a winter base and returning each spring. The city's walls held on land, but the Arab navy controlled the sea approaches. In 678 CE, Constantine IV sent his siphon-bearing dromons into direct engagement for the first time. The Arab fleet was routed, and on its return to Syria, what the Byzantine navy had not destroyed, a storm off the coast of Silion finished. The Arab caliph agreed to a 30-year peace treaty and paid annual tribute to Constantinople, an extraordinary reversal after years of siege. Byzantine chroniclers described the destruction of the Arab fleet as so complete that no accurate count of casualties could be made. The weapon had saved the empire at its most vulnerable moment, and its keepers immediately understood that the secret itself was now a strategic asset equal to any fleet. What happened next shaped how Greek fire would be guarded for the next 400 years. The emperor ordered that the composition be kept from every nation on earth, and that anyone who revealed it would face divine judgment as a traitor to Christendom. What made this oath significant was that it was not merely political, it was written into imperial religious ceremony. The base ingredient was almost certainly naphtha, crude petroleum seeping naturally from the ground near the Crimea and along the eastern Black Sea coast. Byzantine traders had access to these seeps for centuries, collecting the oil in ceramic amphorae and shipping it to Constantinople. Naphtha alone burns but does not adhere. Pine resin or similar tree-derived binders gave Greek fire its stickiness, making it cling to wood, rope, sail, and skin. Modern analyses suggest the mixture may have required partial distillation, a process the Byzantines were capable of performing through copper alembics. The siphon, the brass tube through which Greek fire was projected, operated on a principle similar to a modern pump-action sprayer, using a piston mechanism to build pressure before release. Bronze construction was essential. Iron would corrode from the petroleum compounds, and wood would ignite. The dromon, the primary Byzantine warship, was a double-banked galley between 30 and 50 meters in length, propelled by 100 to 200 oarsmen and fitted with a siphon tube at the prow. Later designs mounted additional siphons amidships and at the stern, allowing fire to be projected in multiple directions simultaneously. Emperor Constantine VII Porphyrogenitus addressed his son in writing in 950 CE, with specific instructions about Greek fire: never to reveal it, never to give it as a gift, never to teach it, even to allies. His text survives. He wrote that God had revealed it to the great Christian emperor through an angel, and that the same angel had forbidden its giving to any foreign people. The production of Greek fire was divided across separate guilds and workshops, each responsible for a single step. One group refined the naphtha, another produced the resin binders, another manufactured the siphons, another trained the operators. No individual outside the innermost imperial circle knew more than one step of the process. Multiple foreign powers attempted to acquire the formula. Arab caliphs offered enormous sums. Rus princes sent spies. Crusader knights interrogated captured Byzantine sailors. None succeeded, and contemporary sources describe Byzantine sailors drowning themselves rather than surrendering their ships to the enemy. Handheld pottery grenades filled with the same incendiary mixture, called xerosifona or hand siphons, were also deployed by Byzantine infantry for close-range siege work. These were essentially clay pots packed with Greek fire, thrown by hand or from catapults at fortified positions. Constantinople's defensive position made Greek fire even more decisive. The city sat on a narrow peninsula where the sea approaches were bottlenecked, forcing enemy fleets into narrow waters where Byzantine dromons could engage at close range. Without that geographic advantage, even Greek fire might not have been decisive. The naphtha supply itself was a strategic vulnerability. It came from specific natural seeps in Crimea and the Caucasus, which meant that control of those regions was tied to the weapons availability. When Byzantine influence in the Black Sea weakened in later centuries, so too did the certainty of the fuel supply. Greek fire was used only in the most critical engagements, not as routine ordnance, but as a last resort, reserved for sieges where the empire's survival was at stake. This deliberate restraint was itself strategic. Deploying it rarely made it more terrifying when it appeared. Greek fire required constant resupply of raw naphtha. Each campaign consumed hundreds of amphorae, each weighing roughly 25 kilograms, transported by merchant ship from the Crimean seeps to imperial depots in Constantinople. The logistics chain was as closely guarded as the formula itself. By the 9th century, Greek fire had been adapted for deployment from land-based catapults as well, hurled in sealed ceramic containers onto besieging armies. The timing mechanism for these projectiles, ensuring ignition on impact rather than in flight, was yet another secret component of the system. Constantine VII's written instructions to his son represent the most explicit surviving primary source on Greek fire, and they contain no formula, only the injunction to guard it. Anna Komnene's Alexiad from the 12th century also mentions Greek fire without revealing its composition, describing it as a substance of terrifying power lit by nothing more than air. For nearly 5 centuries, from the First Arab Siege in 678 CE to the Fourth Crusade in 1204, Greek fire was deployed in at least 7 documented major engagements, each one a decisive moment for Byzantine survival. It was not a weapon of conquest, but of preservation. The siphon operators were among the most highly paid specialists in the Byzantine military. They trained for years, knew the pressure tolerances of their equipment, and could adjust the stream distance and arc of the flame. Getting the range wrong meant setting your own ship on fire. Within the compartmentalized production system, a single master craftsman, the archicaminiaris, or chief of the furnaces, held overall oversight. This position was hereditary, passed within a small number of families for generations, binding the secret to bloodlines rather than institutions. The compartmentalization was so strict that even the raw material handlers, the workers who unloaded naphtha amphorae at the harbour, did not know what they were carrying. Imperial records referred to the substance only by bureaucratic code designations, never by name or description. The Byzantines also deployed a portable version, smaller handheld siphons carried by individual soldiers, which functioned essentially as a military flamethrower with a range of several meters. These were used in close-quarters city fighting and in the defense of breached walls. The Byzantine Navy maintained a standing roster of approximately 15 dromon warships fitted exclusively for Greek fire deployment, kept in permanent readiness at the Boukolion harbour in Constantinople. These ships were never used for cargo, patrol, or any other purpose. Their sole function was the weapon they carried. In 717 CE, the Umayyad Caliph Suleiman ibn Abd al-Malik launched the largest Arab assault on Constantinople ever attempted, a fleet estimated by Byzantine chroniclers at 1,800 ships, carrying an army of 80,000 men. The Greek fire dromons met them in the strait. The Arab admiral Suleiman, not the Caliph, brought an Egyptian reinforcement fleet the following spring, adding hundreds more ships to the blockade. Byzantine dromons intercepted them at night with Greek fire, destroying most of the Egyptian vessels before they could join the main Arab force. The siege ended after 12 months, when a Bulgarian land army attacked the Arab rear and disease tore through the besieging force. The withdrawing Arab fleet was then caught by a storm, and what survived the storm was met by Byzantine dromons carrying Greek fire in the Aegean. Of the Arab fleet that had arrived in 717 CE, Islamic sources record that only 5 ships returned to Syria. The second great Arab attempt on Constantinople, one of the most ambitious naval operations in early medieval history, was annihilated. Emperor Leo III, who had commanded the defense, recognized what had happened. Greek fire had not merely won a battle, but had halted the expansion of the Umayyad Caliphate into Europe. Historians since have argued that had Constantinople fallen in 718, the Arab advance into southeastern Europe would have faced no effective obstacle. As the Abbasid Caliphate replaced the Umayyads and Arab pressure on Constantinople briefly eased, Greek fire's strategic role shifted from immediate defense to deterrence. The weapon still existed, still trained, still resupplied, but its most critical hours were now memory. In 820 CE, a naval rebel named Thomas the Slav built a massive fleet and besieged Constantinople from the sea for over 2 years. Emperor Michael II eventually deployed the Greek fire dromons against Thomas's fleet, destroying it in a single engagement in 823 CE. In 941 CE, Prince Igor of Kiev led a Rus fleet of approximately 1,000 ships across the Black Sea and into the Bosphorus, pillaging villages along the Asian shore of the strait. The Byzantine navy had been deployed elsewhere, and Constantinople was exposed. Emperor Romanos I retrieved 15 aging dromons from storage, retired ships taken out of active service, and had Greek fire siphons fitted to them fore, aft, and amidships. They were crewed, provisioned, and sent into the Bosphorus to meet a fleet 60 times their size. Igor's Rus fleet, seeing the small Byzantine force approaching, moved to encircle it, expecting an easy victory. When the siphons opened, the Rus soldiers, who had never encountered Greek fire, leaped from their burning ships into the strait, choosing the water over the flame. Rus survivors who made it back to shore described the experience to their countrymen in terms that were repeated in the primary chronicle. The Byzantines had lightning in their hands and hurled it at the ships, burning them. They concluded that the Byzantine god must protect his people with this fire from heaven. By the mid-10th century, Greek fire deployment had become embedded in Byzantine military doctrine and treaty language. Alliances with foreign powers explicitly excluded sharing any aspect of the incendiary weapon, its siphons, or its raw materials. These clauses appeared in treaties with the Rus, the Bulgarians, and the Italian maritime cities. By the early 11th century, the Macedonian dynasty that had maintained Greek fire's production began to fracture politically. Civil wars, military governors seizing power, and rapid turnover of emperors disrupted the continuity of the hereditary craftsman families. The weapons still existed, but the chain of knowledge was fraying. When Alexios I Komnenos seized the throne in 1081 CE, he found the treasury depleted and the navy severely weakened. The fleet that had once carried Greek-fire dromons was now partially dismantled, its vessels sold or left to rot. His daughter Anna recorded that Greek fire still existed, but its operational capability had diminished significantly. Alexios deployed Greek fire against the Norman fleet of Robert Guiscard at Dyrrhachium in 1081 CE, one of its last confirmed battlefield appearances. Anna Komnene described the weapon's use in her Alexiad, noting that it struck the Norman ships like a fiery whirlwind, though the engagement was not decisive. In 1204 CE, the Fourth Crusade turned on Constantinople itself. Venetian galleys and Crusader forces attacked the city's sea walls. No Greek fire appeared in the defense, though the city's arsenal still existed, suggesting that by this point the operational knowledge had been lost or the materials depleted. The Crusaders sacked Constantinople for 3 days, carrying off imperial treasures, manuscripts, relics, and workshop contents. Whatever records or materials remained in the Greek fire workshops either burned in the sacking or were scattered among soldiers who did not understand what they had found. The Byzantine government reconstituted itself in exile at Nicaea, but the imperial arsenal, the hereditary craftsman families, and the Crimean naphtha supply chain were all now severed from the refugee court's control. Greek fire was not deployed again after 1204 CE in any documented engagement. When the Byzantines recaptured Constantinople in 1261 CE under Michael VIII Palaiologos, they found the city and its arsenals stripped. The craftsman families who had maintained the workshops for generations had dispersed, some killed, some converted, some simply moved and unreachable. The late Byzantine Empire lasted nearly 2 more centuries without Greek fire, fighting the Ottomans and Italian city-states with conventional weapons, mercenary forces, and diplomacy. The weapon that had saved the empire at its lowest points was gone, and the empire fell in 1453 to Ottoman cannon fire. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 CE closed the 5-century chapter of Greek fire's operational history. In that span, the weapon had appeared in 7 documented engagements, and in every one, the Byzantine side survived an encounter it should not have survived by conventional reckoning. The compartmentalization that protected the secret also killed it. Because the secrecy was so thorough, no single person could reconstruct the full process after the institutional structure collapsed. The very system designed to preserve the weapon guaranteed it could not survive the empire's disruption. In the decades after 1204 CE, Latin Crusader states in the Eastern Mediterranean attempted to reconstruct something like Greek fire from captured Byzantine materials. What they produced, mixtures of quicklime, sulfur, and oil, burned poorly compared to accounts of the original, and could not be projected from siphons effectively. Arab chemists in the 12th and 13th centuries documented their own incendiary mixtures under names translated as naphtha fire or marine fire, citing Byzantine predecessors they could no longer consult. These formulas survive in Arabic manuscripts, but describe materials clearly inferior to the original accounts of Greek fire. The secrecy system had worked with extraordinary efficiency. For nearly 500 years, no foreign power acquired the full formula, despite continuous attempts by some of the most powerful states in the medieval world. But that same efficiency meant that when the institutional structure fractured, nothing was left to reconstruct from. In 678 CE, 718 CE, 823 CE, 941 CE, and 1081 CE, Greek fire intervened at moments when conventional analysis suggested the empire would fall. 5 times in 4 centuries, a single weapon changed the outcome of a siege or naval engagement that should have ended differently. In 678 CE, Callinicus of Heliopolis, the Syrian refugee who had carried his knowledge out of a conquered city, watched from the walls of his adopted city as the formula he had refined burned across the surface of the water. He had no way of knowing it would be the most consequential military secret in the medieval world for the next 5 centuries. Modern chemists have proposed at least 12 distinct formulas for Greek fire based on the fragmentary surviving accounts. None has been confirmed because without the Byzantine compartmentalized production system intact, testing any single formula against the historical accounts is inconclusive. The most detailed modern analysis, by chemist John Haldon and colleagues, concluded that a mixture of crude naphtha thickened with pine resin, with quicklime added to cause self-ignition on contact with water, best fits the surviving accounts. This would explain why water extinguished ordinary fires but accelerated Greek fire. The quicklime reacts exothermically with water, generating additional heat. Historian John Haldon's reconstruction also identified the siphon mechanism as the key innovation, not merely the formula, but the delivery system that allowed the substance to be projected as a pressurized stream rather than thrown in pots. The weapon's lethality depended on both components equally, and losing either one made the other useless. The Byzantine Empire's strategic use of Greek fire has been compared by historians to modern nuclear deterrence, a weapon so destructive that its mere existence shaped the behavior of adversaries, kept in reserve and deployed rarely to preserve its psychological power. The parallel extends to the secrecy doctrine. Both systems depended on the adversary not knowing exactly what the weapon could do. Fractured geological excavations in Istanbul have found ceramic amphorae consistent with Byzantine incendiary storage near the site of the Bukoleon Palace harbour, sealed with traces of petroleum residue in several examples. These fragments are among the only physical remnants of the supply chain that fed the weapon for 5 centuries. The question historians most often raise is not what Greek fire was made of, but what history would have looked like without it. If the Arab fleet had taken Constantinople in 678 CE, the eastern flank of Europe, and the preservation of Greek and Roman classical texts within Byzantine libraries would have faced a fundamentally different outcome. The formula for Greek fire has now been lost for over 800 years, longer than the entire period during which it was operational. What we know with certainty is only what it did. It burned on water. It could not be extinguished by ordinary means. It was projected from bronze tubes, and it saved an empire 5 times. Istanbul today sits on the same peninsula where the weapon was first deployed and ultimately forgotten. The Bosphorus still narrows at the same point where Byzantine dromons waited for Arab fleets, And the water is the same water that Greek fire once burned across. The secrecy that made Greek fire powerful also made it fragile, a weapon that existed only as long as the people who knew it. When those people were gone, the weapon was gone. No formula, no blueprint, no apprentice who had learned the whole process. Callinicus built something that outlasted him by 5 centuries. But the system he created was so tightly bound to the institution that protected it that neither could survive without the other. The empire and the weapon faded together, each dependent on the continuity the other could no longer guarantee. The last confirmed use of Greek fire was in 1081 CE, nearly 1,000 years ago. What burned on the water that day off Dyrrhachium has not burned since, and the formula that made it possible remains, as Constantine VII wrote to his son, a secret belonging to the empire alone.